an in-person audience and our much larger virtual audience that's out there. All of our programs going forward are hybrid, so you have a choice on a cold evening to decide to stay home and watch this conversation. But thank you for these hardy, brave souls to be in person, which we love. So this is our series, Curated Cuisine, where we invite, it began as local chefs that we would invite on the stage, and Sheryl Julian would interview them. And then we just realized it was so popular, and people loved it. And we realized there are so many things to talk about with food. We should expand this to national chefs, and we should talk about eating bugs, and we should talk about foraging. And so this series we see going on in perpetuity, and so we're booked through June. The next one is in March. We have Bipla. On March 21st, Irene Lee is interviewing him. And on April 6th, it's a virtual event. Sheryl Julian will be interviewing Alice Waters. Tonight, it's the bakers. And we have Vallery Lomas and Louise Miller. And I'll hand it over to Sheryl after a couple of housekeeping notes. Vallery, as you may know, won the Great American Baking Contest that never made it to air, which she can explain why. It was a practicing lawyer at the time, and it got into her blood, and she said, forget the lawyering, I'm going to bake first time. Louise is kind of the opposite story. She was a novelist, right? No, I always get it wrong. Louise is a baker turned novelist, and Louise is the pastry chef at the Union Club in Boston, and both of their books, the novel and Valerie's cookbook, are out for sale with our wonderful Brookline independent bookstore, so feel free, they'll be signing copies later. If you have questions, go to slido.com and put in the hashtag Curated Cuisine, all one word, lowercase, and we'll take your questions. Take it away, Sheryl.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. And thank you to everyone online. Before we begin, I want to say that in the midst of terrible times, like we are having right now, a lot of people take comfort in the simple act of baking. They go into the kitchen and they surround themselves with flour and butter and sugar, and they make things that taste wonderful and please all the people around them. And I think that many people did this throughout the pandemic, and they're doing it now again. Tonight we're going to talk to two accomplished bakers and hear what they love about baking and how they got where they are and how you also can become a better baker. And as Amy said, audience questions, go to slido.com and use the hashtag Curated Cuisine. So Louise, to start, can you tell me what kind of baking you do and how you started baking?
Sure. So I'm the pastry chef at the Union Club in Boston, which is a private club, a lot like what you'd think it would be. And so I'm kind of an all-service pastry chef. I do basically anything that involves flour in a recipe scares the chefs, and so that becomes my job. So I make breakfast pastry, I make cookie platters, I do plated desserts. We have a full service dining room, so I have a menu that changes monthly for the dining room. And then we have a lot of private functions, which is kind of the bulk of my work. And so if you're having a speaker for your club or we do a lot of historical events that speakers come and you come and have dinner, and so I make desserts for all of those functions. So I love that about my job. I get to do a little bit of everything. And so I started baking when I was, I think, 23, and to be honest, I spent the first 10 years baking, trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I was a hobby baker, and I had just dropped out of art school. I was really not in a great place in my life, and my father died suddenly. And and part of grieving for me, became very clear that the one thing that I couldn't do was deal with the public, which was what I was doing for work at the time. So I knew I needed to do something behind the scenes, and I loved baking. And so I just got really lucky, and I was hired.
It was a consolation, probably. while you were
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just really, it's just, we've all had experiences of loss. It was just one of those things. I was working at, I was a photography major in college, and I was working at a photo processing place, which is something that doesn't exist really anymore. And I just couldn't care about, someone had a piece of dust on their picture. So I feel so lucky. I got a job at a place where the owner, it was a tiny bakery in Cambridge that's no longer there. And the owner was pregnant, and she was getting ready to go on maternity leave. And for some reason, she hired cranky 23-year-old me, and she trained me. And that was my first job. And it was, I really didn't like it. It was completely exhausting. People don't realize baking how tiring it is. Mm-hmm. It really is. I used to go home and just pass out 2 in the afternoon. But I met my mentor at this job, and
went from there.
Now 30 years later, yeah.
Okay, and Valerie, same question to you. How did you get your start baking?
Yeah, I think a lot of our stories of people who are now baking professionally, I think a lot of them have similar starts. So I grew up baking with my family, especially during the holidays. My mother, she's really big on tradition, so it was okay, Thanksgiving, you're in charge of your grandmother's strawberry delight recipe. And I became the keeper of that recipe in my family. So it was just something that I did with my family that I enjoyed. And when I was in law school, and I was at this time living in Los Angeles, a lot of my family was still in Baton Rouge, where I grew up. And, I was just at a time where things were really challenging. They were challenging in many different ways. The recession was full force. It was my last year of law school, and I was expecting to have this plush job lined up waiting for me, the end of the rainbow, all of the hard work. So when that wasn't there, and just other things in my personal life, it seemed like nothing was really adding up. I was looking for an outlet. And law school, it's so cerebral, and it was so much writing that had to be done, and legal writing, it's very prescriptive, it's very formulaic, and I just wanted a different way to express myself. So I started baking, and I started blogging. And I told myself, I was I'm going to bake something new every day my last year of law school. So that's what I spent my last year of law school doing. And I did not.
Your professors were reading your blog?
Maybe. I never actually even thought about, I know my mom was. Some of my classmates were, my professors, goodness. That's a scary thought, but yeah, so that's how I got started. And then, fast forward many years, because I did end up getting a job as a lawyer. And, it was probably 5 years in that I decided to get on Instagram. And that was what really opened the door to other opportunities. That's how a casting director reached out to me about the Great American Baking Show. And it was kind of like a domino effect after that.
Mm-hmm. So Valerie, there is an idea that if you're going to be a cook, you can be an intuitive cook. You can add a pinch of something to the pot. You can add a spoonful to the bowl. But baking is different. Baking takes precision. What do you think distinguishes a baking from cooking?
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. And I think that there is an intuitive side to baking. My sister, who's in the audience, she's experienced my fix it while you're baking, and whatever other little disasters are happening. But like in my experience, I think people who bake tend to be people who really want to share things with other people. It's really like an expression of generosity in many ways. And I do find that like with baking, your creativity can really come out when you're comfortable with something. Yeah.
I was thinking about that earlier. Like, baking's like a language that you learn, and you get your base recipes. You get these like home recipes that you know you can count on, and then you can just go off in like all the directions. So, you know, you get your pastry cream base and your custard base, and you know, basic cookie, and then it's fun. So I think people think bakers are rigid, and I think that we are in some ways, but yeah, I think there's a lot of creativity once you learn the rules.
Louise, do you think that a baker has a different temperament than a chef?
I think yes.
And
I'm like, how do I not get into trouble? Well, I will say, I mean, I love my job, and part of it is because I'm a hermit. I get to do it ahead of time. You know, I do my work before most of the people in the kitchen arrive. You know, I think you have to enjoy that solitude, and I don't have the temperament to kind of be on the line and there's 100 tickets and like all that. I don't really enjoy that. So I think that there's a difference there. I do think there's a difference, but I don't know. Have you ever been able to kind of put your finger on it? Like,
yeah, I mean, so we're very different bakers, right? Because I don't work in a setting where, you know, nightly I'm preparing dishes that people are going to eat, but I do spend many days, you know, alone in a lot of solitude, just with my oven and my KitchenAid stand mixer. But on the other side of things, because I am an extrovert and it is important that like I do spend time around other people. So it's been really important for me to kind of like carve out a space in this baking world where I get to express that, where I get to teach, whether that's through, you know, through making a video or doing a video somewhere or, you know, doing a workshop. So for me, it's a little bit different, but I would not appreciate like that really quick like expectation of like this now perfect, the end. No.
Of a chef, the
Yes.
chef's part of the kitchen.
Yeah,
The
that's
line.
not my personality.
same.
Okay, so here's a hypothetical situation. I'll start with you, Louise. You're making dinner for friends for no special occasion. Let's say we're celebrating being able to be together again after all these months apart. What's for dessert?
Oh gosh, it's funny. I think I have two different answers: pre-pandemic and during pandemic, because it used to be like something I ordered or something, you know, or cookies. I love to make cookies, but I would buy ice cream because I spend 40, 50, 60 hours in a kitchen. So usually when it comes time to be home, like I would just live on cereal if my partner didn't cook. But for me now, I really, when I stopped working as much during the lockdown, I started baking at home, which I surprised myself by doing that, and I found a lot of pleasure. Right now, I think the answer would be anything from the cookbook snacking cakes, which I'm completely obsessed with. I've been baking my way through snacking cakes the last couple months.
You should probably tell everyone what your definition of a snacking cake is.
So snacking cakes is usually, I'm spacing the author's name, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much. So she defines it as a cake you can make in one bowl. They're very like not futzy cakes. So you can mix them in a bowl. You don't have to take butter out to be at a particular temperature. They're very homey cakes that you can make quickly and share with others.
Louise, who is it who started them?
The author of the cookbook is Yasi Arefi.
Okay.
So she did a cookbook of snacking cakes, but they've been around
I thought
forever. So I really love making homey desserts.
I mean, it sounds like the
that.
sort of thing that a grandmother would be cooking
Totally, yeah.
and making up as she went along. Valerie, here's a question from the audience. James Beard winner Dory Greenspan, who I'm sure you both know, says that you should have fun while you're baking. How much does fun have to do with your baking?
Ooh, I agree. I think it's important to enjoy yourself. Because baking, like, it's a choice that we all have. Like, whether or not you bake something doesn't determine whether or not you're gonna have dinner or something. So I think given that, baking, it's that something extra, you should enjoy it. You should enjoy the process. And I think often maybe people get intimidated or they're a little too concerned about like what's gonna come out of the oven. But I do think that it should be enjoyed, yes. And even if you do like mess up and have a flop, like that's the best way to learn. So just like enjoy all of it.
Also ganache. Ganache cures almost every accident.
Yes.
And let's say what ganache is.
Oh, so it's basically just chocolate melted by hot cream with a little butter thrown in.
Yeah.
Fast, easy, and it covers all the cracks.
When I was in cooking school and a cake didn't work, the teacher, this was in London, the teacher would say, bung it into a bowl and add whipped cream and call it a pud.
Perfect. It's perfect.
Nowadays we then roll them into little balls, call them cake balls.
Yeah.
They're like all the craze.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about what happened during the pandemic with baking. Sort of went crazy. I think people were just grabbing recipes off the internet, and I mean, I'm sort of speaking a little bit about novice bakers, and they were going into the kitchen and baking. They were pretty proud of their baked goods, according to Instagram, and. Were they actually learning? Were they getting a skill? Were they getting skilled? Can you go online and decide I'm going to make whatever it is, a pound cake or something simple, chocolate pudding? You're going to be able to produce something, but are you actually acquiring skill?
I think absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, speaking as someone who did not go to culinary school, like everything that I've done has been trial and error. It's just, I can't tell you how many like pastry creams I've ruined and just made scrambled eggs, very, very sweet scrambled eggs. So yeah, absolutely. I feel like it is so intuitive, right? It's by feel. You have this guide of a recipe. It's a recipe is like a map, but the way that you really learn to bake is by doing it over and over again. I'll never forget, I was being taught at my first job how to decorate a cake. We did a lot of birthday cakes. And there was this moment where I was spreading, you have a wheel that the cake is moving on, and it's moving the spatula. And there was a moment where it's like learning to play an instrument, where I had the turn of the cake and the spatula going the opposite direction, and I created this completely perfect, smooth surface. And it was like, I got it. And no one could explain that to me. Like, I had to physically do it and feel it, and it was thrilling. And yeah.
This is after like a dozen times?
Oh, more than a dozen times, yeah, for sure. For sure, yeah. But so it's, absolutely, I feel like, there's kind of, I feel like in my mind, there's like lanes of baked goods. There's like muffin-y, cakey things, and there's cookie things. It's just, I break it down by process. And and each time you cream butter and sugar together, you learn something. Like it might be the sound. You might hear it from across the kitchen and be like, oh, that's done. Or, or the color.
Does that mean you're leaving your mixer whirring while you're on the other side of the kitchen?
I do, but I don't recommend it because at work a mixer did walk off the counter and it still has this huge dent. But yeah, so anyway, absolutely. I think that everyone that took to baking is learning about the rules of baking and getting better.
Vallery, you agree with that?
Yeah, I think you summed it up, like the tactical process of baking. And I'm self-taught as well. And like you mentioned, like each time you make something, you're learning, so much that you're not necessarily going to learn in a classroom, because like in a classroom, like you mentioned, like the sound when something hits that little like magical moment of when you can move to the next step. And I think that's the part of doing that you're only going to get from experience.
What Malcolm Gladwell calls it 10,000 hours. Okay. Louise, if you're stuck trying to develop something and you want to call on someone, what do you do?
Oh God, that's such a fun thing. I'm like a Dory Greenspan super fan, so I'm not above like tweeting at her, and occasionally she'll answer. I have baking friends, that I'll turn to. I very rarely turn to the chefs because they're afraid of anything with the recipe. A lot of it for me, though, it really is just trial and error. I derive a lot of pleasure from kind of getting things wrong and tweaking, and that's part of the fun of development, right? Is just like, oh, how can I make this a little punchier or a little sharper? Or what happens when I back the sugar off of the sugar? It's so I think 9 times out of 10, I'll just keep experimenting.
Vallery, are you calling home in that situation?
Probably not, but only because like I'm at the point now where I bake so much more than like people who I grew up with, like my mom. But like I like what you mentioned about, the fun and developing something new. And I think often like that new interesting thing just comes from like that innovation comes from whatever it is that you're around in that moment. And often like just necessity, like, oh, well, I ran out of this or so-and-so bought way too much of this at the market and I need something to do with it. And that's the fun part. That's like where a lot of magic can happen.
There's another question from the audience about your regional favorites. So you're from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Maybe you should begin by teaching us how to say Louisiana.
The way you say it is the way I say it, Louisiana.
Okay.
I do hear Louisiana.
Yes, I do too.
Yes.
So what is a regional a favorite from home?
Yeah, I mean, geez. I put like all of South Louisiana in one bucket. But I love bread pudding. It's also like a wonderfully, ridiculously easy dish. Those who are not familiar with bread pudding, you basically take like bread, like kind of day-old bread. You can even use croissants, and you soak it in like a egg, milk, cream mixture, and then bake it. Tomorrow is Mardi Gras, so king cake is a very real thing. I've got a king cake recipe in my book. Oh my gosh, I love king cake. And that is like very obviously Louisiana specific because who else is celebrating Mardi Gras? And you should make them yourself because I've been living out of Louisiana for like years now. And you're just gonna, like the best king cake you're gonna find in Boston is the one coming out of your own oven. Or really anywhere. So, yeah, king cake, bread pudding, pecan candy.
I haven't had that.
Oh yeah, so good. You basically just like cook sugar and then add pecans to
Are
it.
pecan candies and pecan sandies the same thing?
No, pecan
Okay.
sandies are more like a cookie. Pecan candy, you're cooking like evaporated milk or cream or something until it gets to that softball stage, and then you add like pecans, and it's just so rich
It's really good.
and so good.
I'm all like, all right,
Three's
send me
plenty.
that recipe.
Louise, some Boston specialties?
Oh gosh, I love New England desserts. I'm always like, what is New England? The first thing that comes to mind is grape nut custard. I really, I only make that like once a year, but I really love it. And that reminds me of like going to going to an ice cream parlor and them having grape nut ice cream.
What's interesting about grape nut pudding being so typical to New England is that the cereal comes from the Post Company, which was in Michigan.
Yeah, why?
So-
Why do we have grape nut custard ice cream? I have no idea. I'm obsessed with like maple creamies in Vermont. Like I love maple soft serve. I actually made like a maple pot de creme for an event tonight, just because as soon as it hits March, I'm just like, it's maple sugar season. It's time.
So are you telling us that there's an event at your club where you are?
Yeah,
So
I'm not
you did
working
all the
tonight.
cooking,
I did.
and you're here.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that's devotion. And so you said that Louise, you might ask Dory Greenspan for help by tweeting or.
Let me make it clear, I don't know Dory Greenspan, but I just love her.
Yeah.
So
Well,
this is
bakers are so
literally
friendly.
just
They'll-
me.
I
They
mean,
are friendly.
Very friendly to each
True.
other, and it doesn't seem like they're really competing. Like, if you're something happens to a batter and it breaks or curdles or something, and then someone will answer your question in a second. But are there books that you both go to? Valerie, what do you have on your shelf? What books are on your shelf?
I've got a lot of books on my shelf, but
Which ones do you open? Which ones are thumbed and butter smeared? And
yeah, so I actually like really started on this very serious, want to do this as a career baking journey with macaroons. Like when I finished law school, because I didn't apply for any jobs, I didn't have a job. So I went to France for a year where I was working as like a language assistant, like part-time, 15 hours a week, a really great use of my law degree. But like during that, and it was 2010, 2011, so macaroons were like really like starting to like make a splash. And I started eating them there at this boutique, Pierre Hermé. And
so you're talking about the ones that the French call macarons.
yes,
Okay.
des macarons, yes.
Okay.
And that little pastry is when I was like, I'm gonna sell these, and that was my first like idea that I could have a career in baking, because it was never even something I knew I could do. I was just, always under the impression, like, keep going to school. So he had a cookbook, and it was in French. And I was a French major, and so I was like, this is going to be, like, my secret weapon to learn to make macaroons. And I did, and that was, like, my absolute, like, text that I studied that I would keep going back to. Yeah.
In French.
In French.
Yes, although there's now an edition in English.
Okay.
I would like to plug a book, and especially because it reminds me of Valerie's book. 'Cause for those of you that have not yet purchased Valerie's book, which you will do as soon as you leave the room, it's a memoir too. It's a collection of recipes, but it's also like story of your family. And It reminds me so much of my absolute all-time favorite baking book, which is Richard Sacks's Classic Home Desserts.
Oh,
which
it's a lovely book.
Oh, it's such a beautiful book. There is a love story tucked into this book that is a collection of other chefs, like home recipes, recipes from their families. But if you read all the little openings and the little sidebar notes, it's this incredible, beautiful love story of him and his partner. And it reads to me like a memoir. And so when I first purchased your book, I was like, oh, this reminds me so much of Richard Sacks. But I think it might be out of print. And so I have a copy that's completely fallen apart, that like the index is shoved into the middle of the book and it doesn't have a spine anymore. But every time I'm in a used bookstore, I look for it, and I have a couple copies, because I never want to be without it, because it means so much to me.
In your own book, how does baking inform your fiction? This is from the audience, in terms of plot or character development.
Oh my gosh. Well, I really set out. So we were talking about. I've written 2 novels that are really baking centered, and my first book was The City Baker's Guide to Country Living, and it is about a pastry chef who works at a private club. And in the opening scene, the first paragraph reveals that she's having an affair with the married president of the club, and she lights the place on fire by dropping a flaming baked Alaska. And so it was funny, when the book was coming out, my partner was like, do you think the work's going to be at all concerned? So I actually had to sit down and have a meeting with my GM. And I'm like, look, I just want to make it really clear. I am not having an affair. I don't want to set the place on fire. But I did a big inspiration for writing that book was, kitchen world is just a funny little world. And I really love it. And I really wanted to share some of that. And also, on top of not going to culinary school, I also didn't go to writing school. So I really thought it would be really handy to write about something I knew really well when I was trying to figure out how to write a novel. So it was wonderful to kind of lean on all these details that are so familiar. But I was excited to kind of share a little window into that world. It's really fun.
So, on the days that you are baking and you don't leave your mixer whirring on one side of the kitchen while you go to the other, the thought is just so horrifying.
It's a terrible sound.
Okay.
It's a terrible sound. It keeps spinning.
What kind of mixer is it?
It's just a professional KitchenAid.
So a big one.
It's actually, we have a big one that's terrible, it never works. And then we have a normal, it's a little bit bigger than the one you have in your kitchen, and it's got a stronger engine.
And Vallery, what are you using?
I have the exact same one. It was a gift from my mother for my college graduation. I was like, oh, she knew before I knew. Because when she gave it to me, I was like, why did you buy me the professional size? Because it's just slightly bigger than the standard size, but it's I live in an apartment. What? But it came in handy.
Okay. So Vallery, we need a little bit of story about the Great American Baking Show. You won the champion in you were the champion in 2017. There was no publicity.
There ended up being a lot of publicity, actually.
Okay.
Because it was canceled to a lot of publicity.
Okay, well,
Yes.
okay. So tell us about the publicity that the show did get when the judge and pastry chef, Johnny Iuzzini, was, you can finish that up.
Yeah, so honestly, competing on this show was one of the craziest things I've ever done. And it's funny because people asked me if I would do it again, and I was like, no. Because some things you really only need to do once, or you only you will only do once because you don't know quite better yet. But we filmed it in England, because if you guys have seen the Great British Bake Off, it's like the American version of that. We had the same production company, the same crew. Paul Hollywood was one of the judges.
That's interesting. I thought that they had just mimicked the set.
Oh no, it was we were at
was the same
Pinewood
set.
Studios
Okay.
right outside of London. So it was very interesting because we were filming using like, British double cream and triple cream, and the premise of the show is it's for people who are not professional bakers. So that was like a huge part of it, was like using these different ingredients and using Celsius instead of Fahrenheit and using the metric system. But so like the whole process, it was crazy. We filmed it for almost 5 weeks, and I had a job at that time. I was actually like supervising several other attorneys, and I had baked my boss a cake for his birthday like a few weeks before I ended up getting cast. So I think that cake like got me a lot of goodwill to get that time off of work. It really just worked out. But yeah, so it was like a crazy experience. It felt like summer camp, but like with Survivor, because people were getting kicked off.
And they put you up and...
Yeah, we stayed in little like apartment hotels. So at night, it was really long hours, but at night I would like come back to my little apartment with my tiny little oven and my little hand mixer I bought at like Aldi or whatever that store was.
Yeah.
And I was just like baking all night, like an absolute like bake-a-thon nonstop. So, when I won, it was so, like, to me, it was really unexpected because I really felt like everyone who was there had amazing strengths. Like anyone could have won. And, I came back to work and I had to keep this big secret for like 4 months. And because I'm a lawyer, it's like you do always think, well, what's like the worst thing that can happen? Because that's like what you're planning for. You have to think about things from that angle. And I just remember thinking like after we wrapped, and then especially like after it premiered, because the premiere happened, I was like, oh, it's like smooth sailing. So, when it came out, when allegations came out against one of the judges, I was like really...
Sexual harassment allegations.
Yeah. Against Johnny, it was just really like surprising that, the show, like, it was just all very surprising, and it wasn't anything that like we knew was about to happen. So, the show was airing prime time on ABC, and they pulled the show in the middle of the season.
So several episodes aired before they pulled it.
Right. And because I went to school in Los Angeles, I like called some friends who have like publicists and stuff. And I was just like, hey, this thing happened, help. Because it felt like it was really just like, make it all disappear. And, a friend put me in touch with a publicist who basically just like did a good deed and got, a few pretty big outlets to like tune into what was happening. And they wrote stories, and it was like People TV and The Wrap and another outlet. And because they wrote stories, other people started writing stories. Because otherwise, I just don't think it would have just like kind of literally like vanished.
Done what they wanted it to do.
And so because of that, people in the food media industry picked up on what was happening, and they wanted to give me a shot and give me a chance. And that's what really opened up the door for me to have the career that I have now in food media.
You should probably explain your career.
Yeah, so I mean, my career is I contribute recipes. Actually, yesterday was my first contribution to Wall Street Journal. I'm going to have a column with them. And it was, thank you. It was all about king cake and galette de roi, which are like 2 cakes to bookend carnival season. I contribute to New York Times. I actually shot a segment for Live with Kelly and Ryan this morning in New York, and then flew here. And I'm on Instagram. And, it's being like an influencer, as weird as that word is, has really enabled me to also be able to spend my time in ways that I find really fulfilling and satisfying. But, I'm on Instagram at Foodie in New York, and that's another way that I'm able to pay the bills.
And Louise is at Louise the Baker. Louise, tell us a little bit. It's probably slightly less dramatic, your writing program by definition. But tell us a little bit about the process of working in Grub Street's writing program.
Oh, sure.
And with a group of your peers, and explain to us what Grub Street is.
So Grub Street is a private writing center, and so it basically offers writing classes from you want to write and you have absolutely no idea what to do, all the way to helping people get their graduate portfolios together. They do a lot of work for published authors of marketing and things like that. So anyway, they're a wonderful writing center here in Boston, and they have a program that I did called Novel Incubator. And what Novel Incubator is you apply with a full draft of a book, and they choose 10 students a year, and you work together very closely.
Excuse me for interrupting, does it have to be a novel?
Yeah, it's all novels. They have several programs. They have a memoir incubator and I think a short story incubator now too, but the novel incubator was the first program in this format. And so we read each other's novels twice and give feedback at the beginnings. The first 10 weeks we read each other's books, and the last 10 weeks we read each other's books. In between, we critique smaller chunks of the books and study craft. And so it was this incredible opportunity to study basically MFA level writing craft. For me, it was incredible because I never finished my undergrad, so that was completely inaccessible for me. And so it was an amazing year. It was, I think, a big part of it for me. I knew I wanted to write. I had a dream of writing when I was in my early 20s, but I didn't start until I was almost 40. I think I was 38 when I started writing, and I had a lot of fear about writing, and I had a lot of ideas about what a writer looked like. And doing the program, it was such a huge step in me taking myself seriously, and a lot of that was through the process of taking these other 9 writers seriously and their work seriously. And so it was an incredible experience. It was really, really helpful.
So this is an audience question. Rank what you enjoy more, writing, baking, or Instagramming. Give us an order.
Oh, that's hard. They're so different. I mean, I'm always telling my writing friends, become a baker. It's the best job for writers because it's the opposite. It's writing you do alone for years and no one knows what you're up to. At least for me, I try to hide. And baking, it's 45 minutes. I take some raw ingredients, and within 45 minutes, someone's giving me feedback. Yum, hopefully, yum.
So does that make baking first?
No,
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know if I could rank them, but Instagram is not first.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay, Valerie. Rank
I
writing,
like what
baking, Instagramming.
I like what you said about the instant gratification from baking, whether I get to eat it or share it. Writing I would say writing these days for me is more fulfilling. And I've been talking to my life coach about appreciating Instagram. Because it gives me so many opportunities. So I'm going to say Instagram is up there as well. Yes.
Now, do you have tasters that you work with? Because I know for myself there's a threshold of how much you really want to taste something. And also with writing, it's you need feedback, but you really need feedback baking.
Yeah. So what I do is if I'm going to a party or having people over, I don't let people know that they're my tasters, but I just pay attention. I'm what's disappearing first? Because that tells you, like, what are the people going back for? What do people call you the next day? And, like, will you please make this for my birthday? I know you don't really do that, but please. So that's what kind of gives me my insight. Yeah.
That's where your extrovertness really comes in handy, because you get to go and share all of your work. It's funny, both of my novels include recipes, and the second book is called The Late Bloomers Club, and there's a burnt sugar cake with a maple frosting that's very important to the plot. And I added that in because I was like, burnt sugar cake, like maple icing, like it just sounded really good.
And it takes place in Vermont.
And it takes place in Vermont. I wanted something very Vermont-y and kind of traditional Vermont that people might not have tasted before, including me. I had never had it before. And so a lot of times what happens in publishing is you get this really nice email being like, oh, Louise, we'd love that recipe. Could you get it to us by Friday? And it's Monday. And you're like, no problem. And you're like, I have never made this before. So I had 2 recipes for a burnt sugar cake, and I made them both, and they were terrible. And I was like, oh no. And so this was like the beauty of my job was like 9 times out of 10 for groups that come, they just say chef's choice dessert. So everybody got burnt sugar cake that week. And I did the same where I was like, every week I did, every party I did a different version of this cake. And then I would look and see, like, did half the cake come back on the dirty plate at the end of the party? Or is is all the frosting scraped off the plate? And yeah, it was very
Okay, so now we're going to do a round something I call lightning round. And you're either in or out. So if you like something, you're in.
Okay.
And if you don't like it, you're out. Vallery, you're first up. Crisco.
Out.
Salted butter.
In.
Self-rising flour.
In.
Bisquick.
In. Don't tell people. Don't tell people.
Funfetti.
No.
Thermapen.
In.
Oil-based cakes.
In.
Instant oatmeal.
Out.
Quaker cornmeal.
In.
Mayonnaise chocolate cake.
In.
Condensed milk.
In.
Tahini brownies.
Out.
Cocoa nibs.
In.
Chocolate melting wafers.
Depends on the brand.
Freezing ripe bananas.
I will never do that in reality.
Marshmallow in the brown sugar jar.
Out.
Okay.
The formula has changed. Brown sugar doesn't get hard anymore.
Okay.
You noticed?
No, I haven't.
I'm not good at being like quick, sorry.
Okay, that's all right. You're pretty quick. Louise. Banana ice cream hack.
Oh, no, out.
Chocolate microwave mug cake.
Out.
Black bean brownies.
Oh, out.
Make your own buttermilk.
Okay.
Almond flour.
In.
Milk chocolate.
In.
Kitchen scale.
Yes. Yes.
Instant yeast.
Yes.
Baking conversion charts.
Oh, yes. Please.
Ritz cracker apple pie.
Oh, I've never had that. I don't know.
Ready to bake pie crust.
I'm supposed to say out, but I'm going to say in. Because every so often, it's very, very helpful.
Commercial pizza dough.
Oh, out.
Croissant bread pudding.
In.
Vegan butter.
I'm going to say in.
Compost cookies.
I actually don't know what that is.
They're from Milk Bar. It's take whatever's in the fridge or on the pantry shelf.
I'm going to say out just because.
Okay.
I have feelings about that. All right.
Yogurt custard toast.
I don't know what that is either.
You know what?
Is that like a trend that's happening right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, you know what it is?
I'm going to say out because
Okay,
if I saw
no
it on
trends.
the menu, I wouldn't order
Okay.
It's on TikTok.
it. Oh, really?
Yeah. if that helps you decide. Okay, yogurt custard toast is a thick slice of bread, something soft, maybe brioche, if you're going to be fancy. You whisk an egg into yogurt. You make an indentation on the back of a spoon into the soft bread, and you put the yogurt mixture in. Has a little sugar in it or a sweetener, and then you put fruit on top and bake it. You
That sounds exhausting.
You were very generous with the brioche in your example. That was very generous of you.
Okay, because it's usually Wonder Bread.
I just can't imagine a lot of people with brioche who are.
Oh, I see. TikTok and brioche don't go together?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm not seeing it,
Okay.
but maybe.
Okay. Valerie, why isn't there a marshmallow in your brown sugar jar?
Oh, no, I was saying, I think the formula for brown sugar has changed because I've noticed it doesn't get like rock hard if you don't use it within a few days anymore.
But maybe you're because you're baking so much, you're moving through it pretty faster than.
Maybe.
Okay.
But I don't know. I've talked to some other bakers about this. I don't know. I see some people nodding. They're in agreement.
Okay.
So that's why I don't think we need it anymore.
Okay. Let's see, what else was here? Cocoa nibs.
Okay, yeah, listen, I love like cacao. I think it's wonderful. I actually like try to like drink it every morning. It's like full of so many great nutrients, and cacao nibs to like top some brownies to add texture and crunch is great. But just like in general, I don't know if I need it.
Okay. Chocolate melting wafers. You had a particular brand.
Well, yes, because I want them to have enough cocoa butter. Mm-hmm. So like cocoa butter is what makes chocolate melty. So if you buy really high quality chocolate, it's going to have a lot of cocoa butter in it. So it's going to melt really smooth and beautifully. Whereas if you buy like a party brand, it's going to have like something else to make it melty. Mm-hmm. That's not the good stuff. And the good stuff is cocoa butter.
Would you, in a pinch, would you melt chocolate chips?
Yes, with a little bit of like coconut oil or something, or even vegetable oil, yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to think of anything else on this list that horrified you. Funfetti.
Oh, I'm not opposed to funfetti.
Okay. So
I'm not opposed
funfetti
to
is
it.
confetti tiny candies. Is that what they are? Tiny little sugar dots?
I see it as like sprinkles in a white cake, basically. Mm-hmm. Molly Ye, she has like a homemade funfetti cake that I've made that was wonderful and delightful. Mm-hmm. Like actually back before I was like really baking in earnest, like like I am now. But
okay.
I'm not opposed.
Okay. Louise, the banana ice cream hack, you did not like?
If you want to eat ice cream, just eat ice cream. Like,
Okay.
I
So
feel
the
very strongly about
We should explain what it is. You want to explain what it is?
Oh, it's the way I know it's like a Gwyneth Paltrow thing, no offense to Gwyneth Paltrow. But it's like you freeze bananas and then you put them through like a food processor and it becomes like an ice creamy kind of texture. And it's like, that's fine if you want to eat frozen bananas. But if you want ice cream, have some really good ice cream.
Okay, chocolate microwave mug cake. You didn't seem to like that
It's
either?
so easy to make a regular cake. Is it really going to be so good in a mug? I don't know. I don't. It just seems extra. And then you have to clean that mug, and I bet it's really hard to clean.
Okay, I'm sure it's hard to clean. Black bean brownies.
Again.
I can't remember what the black beans are replacing the fat in the brownies. Remind me. Do you know, Valerie?
I've made the like avocado brownies, in which case,
Okay.
yes, avocado is replacing the fat.
Yeah.
And they are more tolerable. I'm with you on the black beans.
It's just, it's just like I love black beans, and I love them like with cumin, and like, and I just think if you want a brownie, just eat a good brownie.
Yeah, eat less of it.
Yeah.
That's my thing.
Eat a small brownie.
Yeah, eat a tiny little rich decadent.
Yeah, like you don't need a lot of brownie.
Yeah, have
you
some
know?
green tea.
Yeah.
Oh, so good.
And then have like a delicious burrito. Like you don't need to combine them.
Love that. We've created a whole menu. That is now your dinner menu.
Okay. Is there anything that you want to ask each other about baking or writing or life or the world?
I would love to ask you just about, I follow you on Instagram and your schedule's so intense, and I just hope that there's someone behind the scenes like booking your travel and like stuff, because it just seems really overwhelming.
Yeah, no, it is. And I'm kind of in between people right now, but you know, I'm like, thank you for acknowledging that. Because I got back about a week ago. I was in Senegal and Benin for about 3.5 weeks. And it was like an amazing opportunity. The State Department, they have this program called Arts Envoys. And so I was basically doing a cultural exchange, specifically culinary exchange. So I was there, you know, sharing American culinary culture and specifically like my Louisiana culinary culture and learning about their culinary culture. But
Very exciting.
Yes, but you're absolutely right. And you know, the thing is, we are in many ways very much entrepreneurs. Like, even like a creative or artist or writer, you're running your business still, and it's definitely something to balance. But I've had an amazing, you know, group of people that have helped me in the past, and currently I do work with a lot of people. I have like someone who manages my social media deals. I have my literary agent. I have people who help with recipe testing, but I'm doing travel right now for the most part. And I guess my question for you is along the same path, which is, I'm so impressed that you wrote a novel. So like, you know, obviously as a baker, you are in many ways like writing recipes, which is like, I'm like, that's like nonfiction lifestyle. How do you then like turn on that part of your brain to kind of like create this whole like fictitious world? And also, where do you find the time?
Well, as Vallery, you will know, like there's so much mundane time when you're baking. Like it's like if you're doing, you know, it's the scooping or the rolling out of, you know, biscuit dough, or like, I always use the example of like peeling those annoying stickers off of fruit before you use it. Like when I'm doing that at work for, you know, a party of 50, like just the sticker removal is going to take me like 45 minutes.
Okay.
And so I secretly, or not so secretly, use all of my time at work where I don't need to like focus mentally on what I'm doing to think about writing. And I actually, when I'm in the middle of a book, or especially when I'm revising, actually go into my workday with like my baking prep list and my writing prep list. Like, so I go in with the day, be like, okay, why is Margaret losing the pie contest? And then, because it's just like when you're,
and I loved it.
you know, it's just like when you're running or you're taking a shower and you have all your best ideas. I feel like I have all my best ideas when I'm taking those stickers off the pears. And like, so I really use my work time. So when I'm sitting down in front of a computer, I'm not thinking, I'm not trying to figure things out, because that's like, you get so frozen sitting there trying to decide. So when I actually finish baking, I have it all, like the next chunk worked out. And so they're good companion.
Thank you. Thank you both for coming and chatting and bringing goodies and your books, and everything's going to be, I think Amy is going to come out and tell us what's going to go on in the lobby.
Thank you so much. Sheryl, you always do such a fabulous job of bringing out these personalities and these cooks, and I always love your list. It's so imaginative. Go to wbur.org/events, find out what's coming up next. March 3rd, on Thursday, we're having one of our journalists talk about her trip in the South a year ago, where she reported on the dismantling of Confederate statues. And we have pictures and music, and it's going to be journalism on stage here, and she's going to talk about her reporting. In the lobby is Valerie's beautiful cookbook, Louise's novel, and almond macaroons, and a cranberry raspberry coffee cake, and I've already tasted both, and they are delicious. So please go outside and enjoy and buy a book and meet these wonderful bakers. Thank you for coming.
All right, thank you so much.